This is Heavenscape, Year 1, the Strathmore Chronicles, brought to you by Saturday Night Gaming. The Strathmore Chronicles, written by Tony and Jessica Stevens, narrated by Tony Stevens, Ronnie Shenks, Dan Stevens, and Jessica Stevens. Solaris Showdown, Episode 2, Seething. It was rare to find the CO of the Sky Station on the engineering deck, and this was apparent by the shocked faces of several low-ranking officers. They hurried to salute Commander Strathmore as he rushed past them. He was a man on a mission, and nothing would deter him from completing it. Arthur had spent so long serving the Alorian military as a combat officer that this docile environment unnerved him. He easily reverted to old ways of thought, categorizing events as threat levels. Currently, he viewed Dr. Stein as a high-level threat to the Alorian nation and to all the peoples of Valos. He ignored all others before him and walked with speed and intensity to Stein's last known location. He came to a door marked Engineering, Level 1. He rushed through his authorization protocols and scowled at the door, irritated it hadn't opened faster. On any other day, he would have been overcome with sheer awe as he entered the expansive room. It was one thing to go over system schematics, but it was something altogether different to see it in person. This sky station truly was a miracle of modern mechanical engineering. Power units, transistors, and access terminals adorned the walls. In the center of this massive room stood a tremendous cylindrical containment unit affixed with several power couplings. 7 levels of catwalks, balconies, and railings circled the station's soaring power core. Inside the core, a murky crimson energy churned about, beating against the glass. It throbbed, thrashed, and pulsed like something alive, something angry. A low hum of trembling energy surged through this place. It felt as if his insides were being turned upside down. To Strathmore, this feeling was similar to being too close to a concussive grenade when it went off. His skin crawled, like an itch from the inside. Arthur forced himself further into the room. The air tasted metallic the further he went, and the air seemed heavier. The energy vibrated every cell in Strathmore's body, increasing his sense of unease and amplifying his anger. Stein stood no more than 10 feet away at a monitoring control terminal embedded into the core. He was a tall, barrel-chested man. He had a clean-shaven head and groomed his beard into a tidy chin strap. His white lab coat hugged tightly onto his larger form. His right arm and the majority of the right side of his face were modified with his own signature cybernetics. He glanced up as Strathmore marched closer to him.
Commander, how nice of you to visit with me today. Is there something I can do for you?
Strathmore looked into the one good eye of the scientist. He did his best to ignore the cybernetic ocular implant where the doctor's right eye used to be. Its wide red lens shifted, monitoring Stein's surroundings. Strathmore searched the face of this man he had spent so much time despising. He had known Dr. Stein since he was a young man, since he first enlisted in the Alorian military. He often found himself trying to decipher the motives of this cold, calculated man. Out of all the people he had ever met, Thaddeus Miles Stein continued to be the one and the only one he could never figure out.
You know exactly why I'm here, Stein. I want to know why.
I'm afraid you'll have to be more specific, comrade.
Thaddeus Stein had a very strange, thick accent that Arthur had never heard from anyone else. The play of ignorance infuriated Strathmore even more.
Riverside, you monster! I want to know why. All those people. All those lives.
Dr. Stein moved away from his workstation and stepped slowly towards his inquisitor.
Now I see. I heard of these, though I was not where you hid. The terrorist cell using Riverside as a base of operations forced the hand of our commandant. Obviously, the loss of innocent life is regrettable. However, in this instance, necessary.
Arthur's blood began to boil, his head pounding from the rage.
How is mass murder necessary? How can you justify this?
You must understand, the greater good must outweigh the lives of the few. A few thousand die, but millions now live in peace. They sleep tonight with safety and security.
Safety? Security? You extinguish people's lives and call it peace? You steal futures from innocent people. You experiment on unwilling children. You push your agenda on the Alorian nation. How can you sleep at night?
The doctor turned away from Strathmore and faced the massive reactor core. The movement blocked his cybernetic arm from Strathmore's view. He placed his left hand on the vibrating panels as a distraction. The energy inside reacted instantly, slamming into the barrier. The metals that composed his advanced prosthesis began to shift and transform. Unknown to Arthur, the high-tech appendage was now reshaping and forming an energy cannon.
It seems you know a great deal more than you should, comrade.
His eyes still watched the seething crimson energy as it battered the panels trying to reach his hand.
I told the commandant I'd keep an eye on you. Now it seems he had a good reason to suspect you. Duh.
Stein turned his head, eyes flashing as he studied Arthur intently. The cybernetics of his eye began to whir, and the red lens glowed bright. With enhanced speed, he whipped his energy cannon toward Arthur and released a blast of deadly might. Arthur Strathmore realized just in time the doctor's intent. Relying on years of battle-tested experience, he rolled out of the way. The pulse of energy flew wildly and exploded against a control panel on the wall. Stein grunted in aggravation and shifted his body to take aim again. Strathmore pulled his sidearm free from its holster. The weapon in his hand became an extension of his own instincts. He freed several rounds from the chamber as he rolled across the cold steel floor. He rushed for cover behind the massive power core, hoping Stein wouldn't be foolish enough to fire at the core. He forced himself to slow his breathing and steady his mind. This was the moment he had waited for. That vile doctor finally gave him what he wanted most, a reason to kill him. The energy churning within the core grew more violent. Arthur could feel it in his bones, like a poison. He tried to focus his mind. He knew he couldn't stay here long, whatever this power source was. It was obviously deadly. He emerged from cover and fired several more rounds. One of them struck true as it ricocheted off the armored plating around Dr. Stein's cybernetic eye. The large man stumbled back with the slightest groan of pain. Arthur settled back into cover as he reloaded his weapon. He continued to try to calm himself, but he felt completely consumed by anger. His pulse was pounding harder than ever before, and his mind was a fog of fury. He couldn't seem to shake it. He knew he had acted irrationally. He should have played it safe, but he couldn't help himself. He craved vengeance. It was consuming his mind even now. Stein readied his aim again. The bowels of the energy cannon ignited in a white-hot glow. This time, a twisted smile spread across his face.
I always had high hopes for you. It is not a complete loss, though. There are more ready and able to take your place. Das Vidania!
Stein released an enormous amount of energy. The shot hit the containment chamber head-on. A large crack formed across its surface, and pure red energy began to claw free from the chamber. Crackling power pulsed through the room as it was released in a steady stream, the color of blood. The crack widened as the crimson vapor bled from its prison.
Warning. Power core breach. Lockdown initiated. Engineering. Levels 1 through 7.
An alarm began to sound, and reinforced doors slammed shut on every level of engineering, the metallic boom of each echoing through the massive chamber. Arthur watched with dread as the red energy crept toward him, almost like smoke fleeing from a lit cigarette. It moved effortlessly and with subtle grace. He knew he couldn't leave his cover, and yet he also could not allow himself to become poisoned by this radiation. He was truly at a loss, with no idea what to do next. Just as all hope fled from him, he felt a soft touch upon his cheek. Faint whispers floated around his head, and a familiar feeling crept up his spine.
Don't give up, Arthur. I need you. Take what is yours.
He opened his eyes to see the vermilion vapor dancing around his body. It almost seemed to take form, and he was reminded of the beautiful visage he saw in the mirror earlier this very morning. Her touch still burned on his cheek. He couldn't form words, or even think clearly. All he knew now is that he wanted to be at one with her. The containment glass continued to strain and crack, releasing more radiation. Arthur Strathmore stood confidently and took aim at the stress fractures in the reinforced glass. Without a moment's hesitation, he gave in to the voice, beckoning him, and emptied the clip into its target. The barrier ruptured, and an energy exploded forth, seething with rage and indignation. A look of shock and awe overcame Stein as he watched, unable to react in time. He dove to the ground and tried to find shelter from the raging power. Ripples of raw energy coursed through the air as the station's power supply was unchained. The alarms blared louder.
Warning. Catastrophic power systems failure. Life support systems offline. All personnel evacuate immediately.
Arthur stood strong as wave after wave of unchecked elemental power crashed into him. He could still hear her voice calling to him. She needed to be free, and he had to be the one to do it. He knew this was what he was born for. This was his reason for existing, and it was consuming him. He mustered all of his will and pushed himself forward toward the shattered core. His flesh felt like it was on fire, and his bones trembled from the sheer force. It was like being caught within a tornado, except it didn't want to harm him, merely caress him. He reached forward into the massive well of power. In that moment, he felt something reach back and take hold of him. Stein watched in horror as he saw the burning energy take shape in Arthur's hand. Strathmore's eyes flared with rage as a massive vortex of terrible power filtered into him. The commander's stance changed as if to support a great weight, and the floor itself seemed to crack beneath his feet. The sounds of the alarms were deafening. The air itself seemed supercharged and alive.
Warning. Catastrophic power systems failure. Life support systems offline. All personnel evacuate immediately.
Every muscle tensed in Arthur Strathmore's right arm. His veins felt like they would explode as pain tore through him. His bones felt like they were shattering and healing over and over again, and his skin felt new and raw. He couldn't hold back the screams any longer. The crimson power finally took shape in his hand as a mighty claymore. The massive blade blazed with living flame. It pulled at his very soul and seemed to feed upon his anger. He felt the blade trembling with terrible power as energy continued to flow from it steadily. Arthur Strathmore turned and met Stein's eye. The two men took a step towards each other, oblivious to the destruction around them. The world was tearing apart. The Solaris Sky Station exploded in a blinding red light. The sky over Valos rained fire and bodies and debris into the desert below.